All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today, we are exploring the world of Inuit mythology.
Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to me how these stories, these myths, they uh, they really reflect the environment.
Yeah.
Like they're born from the landscape and
Oh, absolutely.
the challenges that people face.
You can't separate the two,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about the Inuit people
Right.
living in the Arctic. It's a world of ice and snow where survival depends on understanding the rhythms of the sea and the sky.
Yeah, and the stories, they're not just like bedtime stories, are they?
No, 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 they're a guidebook. They're how you navigate a world full of
Yeah.
unseen forces and very real dangers.
Well, speaking of dangers, I hear we're starting with a creature that might make you think twice about letting the kids wander too far from the village.
Yes,
Kupik.
the sea creature.
Okay.
Imagine you're an Inuit child playing near the water's edge and you see this figure,
Okay.
long hair, long nails, draped in a garment, like a mother carrying a child.
But there's something not quite right about her.
So she looks nurturing, but she's actually dangerous.
Exactly. Kupik's purpose is to snatch disobedient children and drag them to the depths.
Oh, wow.
It's a chilling reminder of the very real danger of the Arctic,
Yeah, that'll keep the kids in line.
and a pretty effective way to instill obedience.
Definitely. But it also makes you realize how important community and obedience were for survival, right? Like you couldn't just
Oh, absolutely.
wander off and do your own thing.
In that environment,
Yeah.
straying from the group, not listening to the elders, that could mean disaster.
Yeah.
Kupik embodies that very real threat. She's a symbol of the consequences of disobedience.
So Kupik is a terrifying warning. Okay.
Mhm.
But I'm guessing not all the figures in Inuit mythology are out to get you.
Oh, of course not. There are figures of immense power and generosity,
Okay, good.
like Sedna. Have you heard of Sedna?
Yeah, Sedna, she's a big deal, right? Huge. Sedna is the goddess of the sea, the ruler of the entire underwater world. And you have to understand, for the Inuit, the sea isn't just a pretty view, it's their livelihood, their food, their way of life.
Right, right. It's everything.
So Sedna, she's not just a story, she's the key to their survival.
So are you saying that like every time an Inuit hunter went out on the ice, he was thinking about Sedna?
Pretty much. They would offer her gifts, prayers, anything to ensure a good catch.
Wow.
And it makes sense, right? If the sea is your lifeblood, you better respect the one who controls it.
Yeah, it's like a cosmic gamble, right? You depend on the sea's bounty, but you're also aware of its power to destroy.
Exactly.
And Sedna, she represents both sides of that coin.
A great way to put it. Sedna can be generous, providing abundant seals and whales, but she can also unleash storms and famine if she's disrespected.
So it's not just about fear, it's about understanding the power of nature and respecting its limits.
And that duality really underscores the delicate balance humans must maintain with the environment.
It's a message that resonates even today, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like, we're facing the consequences of our own
Oh, absolutely.
environmental actions.
Sedna's story feels surprisingly relevant in a world where we're dealing with climate change and all these other issues.
Yeah.
It's all about balance.
Okay, so we've gone from a creature that embodies fear to a goddess who demands respect.
Right.
What about Akini?
Akini.
He's a skeletal spirit, right?
Ah, yes, Akini. Now, he's a fascinating case. He was once human, a talented musician, actually, but he
Yeah.
was also incredibly arrogant, boasting about his skills, and, well, let's just say, a powerful shaman decided to teach him a lesson.
Ooh, I sense a be careful what you wish for moment coming.
You could say that. The shaman transformed Akini into a skeletal spirit, stripped him of his flesh and his pride.
Oh, wow.
But Akini, he didn't go quietly. He continued to play his music. Only now his drumming and dancing caused natural disasters. Tsunamis, earthquakes.
So it's like his music, once a source of joy and pride, became a weapon of destruction.
Precisely. It's a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris,
Right.
thinking we're above nature's power.
Yeah.
Akini's story reminds us that disrespecting nature can have some serious consequences.
It's like that saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Right.
And in Akini's case, his fall brought chaos and destruction. Makes you wonder, are there any, like, purely benevolent figures in Inuit mythology? Or is it all just like doom and gloom?
Oh, of course there are. Not all spirits are harbingers of doom. Let's shift our focus from the depths to the sky above. Have you ever looked up at the moon and wondered about its phases?
Yeah.
The Inuit have a beautiful explanation for that.
I am all ears, and I hope it doesn't involve any more skeletal musicians.
No, no skeletal musicians this
Okay,
time.
good.
This one's a bit more romantic. It involves two celestial siblings, Igalo, the moon god, and Melina, the sun goddess.
Okay.
Their story is a cosmic dance of pursuit and evasion.
A celestial chase. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Igalo is forever in pursuit of his sister Melina, but she always manages to stay just out of reach. This eternal chase, it represents the different phases of the moon.
Oh, great.
As Igalo gets closer, the moon waxes, and as he falls behind, it wanes.
Wow, so every full moon is like a near miss in their cosmic dance. That's pretty cool.
Isn't it? And think about it. In a world without calendars or clocks, this myth provides a way to mark the passage of time, a crucial tool for hunting and survival.
So it's both poetic and practical. And it really shows how the Inuit people found meaning and order in the natural world.
Exactly. They observed these patterns and wove them into their stories.
But I'm guessing the Arctic isn't just about moon gods and goddesses.
You're right. It's teeming with life,
Yeah.
both real and mythical.
Okay, give me the rundown. What kind of creatures are we talking about?
Well, there's Tiero, the terrifying Arctic sea serpent.
A sea serpent.
Imagine a creature so massive it can capsize a boat with a single flip of its tail.
Definitely not something you want to encounter on your fishing trip.
And then there's Amuk, the trickster wolf.
Okay, so we got a wolf now.
Now he's a more complex figure, fierce and cunning, but he also protects the land and its creatures. He's a sort of guardian spirit, but with a mischievous streak.
So not your average big bad wolf, huh?
Not at all. Amuk tests people, pushes their limits, reminds them that the Arctic is a place where survival depends on respect and humility. You can't take anything for granted.
Yeah, you got to be on your toes.
Exactly.
It sounds like the Inuit really had a sense of the duality of nature. You know, it could be beautiful and life-giving,
Yep.
but also harsh and unforgiving.
Oh, absolutely. And their myths, they reflect that understanding. They knew that to survive in the Arctic, you had to be aware of both sides of the coin.
So we've got terrifying sea serpents, trickster wolves, and a whole lot of respect for the power of nature. What else is in store for us on this deep dive into Inuit mythology?
Well, we've only just begun to scratch the surface. There are goddesses of balance, creatures that blur the lines between human and animal, and spirits who guide souls to the afterlife.
Sounds like we're in for quite a journey.
Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride.
I'm ready for it.
Speaking of balance, that brings us to Pinga.
Pinga.
You can think of her as the lifeblood of the Arctic, the goddess who makes sure everything keeps flowing, hunting, fertility, weather.
So she's kind of like the ultimate provider.
Exactly. Making sure there's enough food, enough new life to sustain the community.
Yeah, I bet she was pretty popular.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the importance of a successful hunt in that environment, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about dinner, it was about survival.
Right.
So Pinga, she wasn't just a figure in a story, she was a vital part of their daily existence.
I can see why the Inuit wouldn't just pray to her.
Mm-hmm.
They would have a whole relationship with Pinga.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about taking from nature, but also giving back, acknowledging that balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings up a really important point. One that I think we can all learn from today, It's about understanding that we're not separate from nature. We're part of this intricate web.
It's like those nature documentaries where they show how everything is connected.
Right.
The wolf eats the caribou caribou feeds on the lichen. It's a cycle. It's all,
A delicate balance.
it's a delicate balance, yeah.
And the Inuit, they understood that intuitively. They're myths. They're full of creatures that blur the lines between human and animal, reminding us that those boundaries aren't always so clear.
Okay, you're going to have to give me an example of that. What kind of creatures are we talking about?
Well, let's talk about the adlet.
The adlet, okay.
Imagine you're out on the ice, the wind is howling, and in the distance you see a figure approaching.
Okay.
Half human, half dog,
Whoa.
fierce, agile, and definitely not something you want to mess with.
Half human, half dog. That's straight out of a nightmare.
Right. It makes you think about what it would be like to live in a world where the familiar and the strange, the human and the wild are constantly intertwined.
Yeah, it really does.
The adlet, they represent that liminal space, that blurred boundary between worlds. They're a reminder that the Arctic can be both beautiful and dangerous, and that stepping into the wilderness means stepping into the unknown.
So it's not just about respecting the physical environment. It's about recognizing the spiritual forces at play, too, right? The unseen world
That's
that
right.
exists alongside our own.
Exactly.
This is all so fascinating, but it's also making my head spin a little. We've got goddesses, sea creatures, trickster wolves, and now these hybrid beings.
Hmm.
Where do we even go from here?
Well, every journey has an end, and even in Inuit mythology, there are figures who deal with that final transition.
Okay.
Let's talk about Anguta, the soul collector.
The soul collector. Okay, this sounds intriguing and a little bit ominous.
Imagine the vastness of the Arctic, the endless ice and snow.
Yeah.
Now imagine a figure cloaked in shadows who walks among the living and the dead. That's Anguta.
Okay.
He collects the souls of the departed and guides them to the Inuit underworld.
So like a psychopomp, a guide for the souls on their final journey.
Exactly.
It's interesting how many cultures have figures like that.
Mm.
It makes you wonder if it's a universal human need, to make sense of death, to imagine what happens after we leave this world.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Uh,
The Inuit believed that death wasn't the end, but a transition to another realm. And Anguta, he ensures that transition is safe and smooth.
So he's not necessarily a fearsome figure, more like a benevolent guide.
Right, he's a necessary part of the cycle.
But what about those who are still living? Are there any figures who watch over them, protect them?
Of course. We can't talk about Inuit mythology without mentioning Nanak, the polar bear spirit. Think of him as the king of the Arctic, a powerful figure who governs all hunting activities.
Okay, so this isn't just some cuddly mascot.
No, yeah.
We're talking about a serious force of nature.
Absolutely. For the Inuit, the polar bear wasn't just an animal, it was a symbol of strength, resilience, and survival. And Nanak, he embodied those qualities. Hunters would offer him prayers and rituals, seeking his blessing for a successful hunt.
So it's interesting because it's not just about asking for permission to hunt.
Right.
It's about recognizing the bear's spirit, its power, acknowledging the balance between hunter and prey.
Precisely. And it went even deeper than that. The Inuit believed that Nanak actually chose which bears would be hunted.
Wow.
It was a way of ensuring that the bear population remained healthy, that the cycle of life continued.
It's like a spiritual contract,
Right.
a recognition of the interconnectedness of all beings,
Yeah.
You take a life, but you do so with respect, with gratitude, and with the understanding that you're part of something larger than yourself.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I think it's a lesson that's more relevant now than ever before,
Yeah.
In a world where we often feel disconnected from nature, the Inuit myths remind us that we are all part of this web of life, and that our actions have consequences.
So we've gone from terrifying sea creatures to celestial dances, from trickster wolves to this powerful polar bear spirit.
It's quite a range, isn't it?
It is. I have to say, this deep dive into Inuit mythology has been quite a journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, you mentioned earlier that these myths have something to teach us today,
Oh, they do.
even if we don't live in the Arctic. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. The Inuit people, they thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth for centuries.
Yeah.
They learned to live in balance with nature, to respect its power, and to understand their place within the ecosystem.
And you're saying that those lessons, they're still relevant to us today.
Absolutely. We might not be facing down polar bears or navigating icy waters, but we are facing our own challenges,
Right.
climate change, pollution, a growing disconnect from the natural world. The Inuit myths, they offer a different perspective,
Right.
a reminder that we're not separate from nature, we're part of it.
So it's not just about learning about a different culture. It's about learning from their wisdom, their way of seeing the world.
Exactly. And that wisdom, it's encoded in their stories. Take Sedna, for example.
Okay.
She's not just a goddess. She's a reminder that our actions have consequences.
Right.
If we disrespect the environment, if we take more than we need, there will be a price to pay.
It's like those cautionary tales we heard as kids.
Mm-hmm.
Don't litter, conserve water, be kind to animals. But in the Inuit myths, those lessons aren't just for children.
Right. They're for everyone.
Yeah.
They're woven into the very fabric of their culture.
It's not just about fear either, is it? It's about understanding,
Exactly.
recognizing that we're part of something larger than ourselves and that our survival depends on the well-being of the whole.
I think that's a really important point.
It is, yeah. It's a pretty powerful message, especially in a world where we often focus on individual needs and desires,
It is. And it's not just about the big picture stuff like climate change. It's about how we live our daily lives, how we treat each other, how we treat animals, how we treat the planet.
So it's like a shift in perspective,
Exactly.
a way of seeing ourselves as part of this intricate web of life rather than separate from it.
I think that's the key takeaway here.
We've talked a lot about balance and interconnectedness. But what about the darker side of Inuit mythology? You know, those creatures that embody fear and danger.
Right.
What role do they play in this worldview?
Well, I think it's important to remember that the Arctic is a harsh and unforgiving environment. It's a place where survival is a daily struggle and where nature's power is constantly on display.
So those creatures, they're not just monsters in a story. They're reflections of the very real dangers that the Inuit people faced every day.
Exactly. Kupik, the sea creature who snatches disobedient children,
Right.
she's a reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the ice, the importance of listening to the elders and staying close to the community.
And Tiero, the giant sea serpent. He represents that unpredictable nature of the sea, you know, the power that can capsize a boat and swallow a hunter whole.
They embody the fear and respect that the Inuit people had for the natural world.
Okay.
They're reminders that nature is not something to be trifled with.
But it's not just about fear, is it? There's also a sense of awe,
Of course.
a recognition of the beauty and mystery of the Arctic.
Absolutely. The Inuit myths are full of creatures that are both terrifying and beautiful, dangerous and life-giving. They reflect the duality of nature, the understanding that it can be both a source of sustenance and a source of destruction.
It's like that saying, you know, respect the power of nature, but also appreciate its beauty.
Exactly.
The Inuit myths seem to embody that sentiment perfectly.
They do, and I think it's a sentiment that we can all benefit from. In a world where we often try to control and dominate nature, the Inuit myths remind us to approach it with humility, respect, and a sense of wonder.
It's a powerful message, one that I think we all need to hear. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from terrifying sea creatures to celestial dances, from trickster wolves to a wise polar bear spirit. But I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this fascinating world.
We have. Inuit mythology is rich and complex, and there's so much more to explore, but I hope this deep dive has given you a taste of its beauty, its wisdom, and its relevance to our lives today.
Yeah, it really is amazing how much we can learn from these stories even today, you know?
It is. And they really make you think, don't they, about what it means to be human, to live in this world,
Yeah.
to face those big questions.
I've always been fascinated by mythology, but sometimes it feels, I don't know, a little bit distant.
I know what you mean.
But with the Inuit myths, it's like they're so grounded in the reality of their lives.
Well, they had to be, right? These stories weren't just entertainment. They were vital for survival.
Yeah, like a blueprint for living in a world where nature is both beautiful and dangerous.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there one key takeaway, one big lesson that you hope people will walk away with?
If there's one thing I hope people remember, it's this. We are not separate from nature.
We've talked about that a lot today.
And for good reason. It's a fundamental truth that I think we've lost sight of in the modern world.
It's easy to forget when you're surrounded by concrete and technology.
Right. But the Inuit people, they understood that connection deeply.
And their myths, they remind us of that, They show us what it means to live in balance, to respect the power of nature, to understand that our actions have consequences.
I think that's a really important message, especially now when we're facing so many environmental challenges.
It can all feel a bit overwhelming sometimes, right? Like, what can one person do?
I know, but even small actions can make a difference.
Yeah.
And it starts with a shift in perspective, recognizing that we're part of this web of life, not separate from it.
So it's not just about recycling or, driving a fuel-efficient car.
Right. It's about a deeper understanding of our place in the world.
It's about remembering those lessons from the Inuit myths.
Respect, balance, interconnectedness.
The stories, they give us hope, don't they?
They do.
Show us that it's possible to live in harmony with nature, even in the harshest of environments.
And that's a powerful message to carry with us.
So as we head back from the icy landscapes of the Arctic back to our own lives, let's remember the wisdom of the Inuit people.
Let's keep their stories alive.
Let's make choices that honor that connection to nature.
And let's face the future with a sense of hope and a commitment to creating a world where humans and nature can thrive together.
Well said.
Yeah.
That about wraps up our deep dive into the incredible world of Inuit mythology.
That's been a pleasure.
A real pleasure. And for our listeners, if you're eager to learn more, don't forget to check out the show notes.
We've got tons of resources there.
We'll have links to books, articles, documentaries, all sorts of goodies to keep you exploring.
Keep that curiosity alive.
Until next time, folks, keep diving deep.